Traveling with camera gear can be quite cumbersome at times, and with so much to carry, things can get a little bit chaotic and heavy. So what if I told you instead of the 3 or 4 primes that you have in your camera bag, you can replace those with one lens that can perform the same as 4 primes? That's right, one lens. Enter the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 art lens. The Sigma lens has a maximum aperture of f2.8, which is great for background blur, and it has one extra stop of light from the f4. At the front you get an 82mm thread, which is on the bigger side. Speaking of, this lens is massive, weighing at 830 grams. Which, although heavy, you will kinda get used to sooner than later. And with a focal length of 24-70, there is not much that this lens cannot cover. From wide building shots to close detailed shots, this lens can do it all. The Sigma 24-70 is built like a tank. It is made out of high quality plastics, which does make it a heavy lens, but for what it's packing, this lens is definitely worth it. It has a sealed rubber gasket, which makes it dust and water resistant, and I've used it in heavy rain on my A7S III for about 30 to 40 minutes. No issues there, all good. Every single button on this lens feels smooth and premium. Sigma did not cheap out on the quality. Don't let the price tag fool you. After about a year of use, there is barely any signs of wear. Sure, some dust here and there, but nothing that cannot be wiped off. The autofocus to manual focus is very satisfying. In fact, I have an issue, I keep clicking it on and off whenever I'm not using my camera. It has a round custom button that can be programmed with the appropriate camera, and a zoom lock button for storage to keep your lens in place. The huge 82mm thread up front is not exactly common. I had to buy a separate ND filter, but on the plus side, it is as big as the lens can get really, so you'll just have to buy a step down ring for your filters. And you also get a plastic hood in the box, which is always a plus. At 24mm, this is as wide as you need pretty much. Unless you're shooting real estate or wide astrophotography, you're gonna be fine with 24mm. And zooming all the way to 70mm, it is not as tight as an 85 or a 105 lens, but it definitely gives that semi-telephoto look and a little bit of compression. Now, the main reason that I say this is the only lens you need for traveling is not because of the focal length. There are other 24-70 lenses out there, but it's because of the sharpness that is maintained throughout the focal length. With the Sigma 24-70, I feel like I have 4 primes in my bag. It's like 4 primes crammed into one zoom lens, with a constant f2.8 aperture throughout the entire zoom range, maintaining extreme sharpness. It's an art lens after all. This lens is flawless. This makes it a perfect lens for traveling, since you don't need to be swiping lenses. Swiping? You don't need to be swapping lenses. You basically have a 24, 35, 50 and a 70mm prime. The 24mm can give you the establishing shots, 35 to 50 can give you the body shots, and you can zoom into 70mm to get those dramatic emotional shots. All of that just in one lens, with the great sharpness on every focal length. Now, for run and gun guerrilla travel filmmaking, you definitely need a lens that has great autofocus, because if the autofocus is not reliable, the lens is pretty much obsolete. And paired with the Sony A7S III, I can safely say I have never missed focus with this lens. It is accurate, it is fast as heck, and it does not disappoint. This is one of the crucial features when looking for a lens for travel filmmaking, since you don't have the luxury of time or a studio set to be focusing manually or to take the shot 5 or 6 times. You need a very reliable autofocus on your lens. Now, it may not be as fast as a native Sony lens, but it's still reliable and very accurate. And from a year of use, I've never had any issues with the autofocus at all. As for manual focusing, I don't use it that much, but when I do, it is very accurate and it's very smooth. I love the smooth ring on the lens. It is not loose and is just as tight as you want it to be. Pairing that with the peaking display on the A7S III, I can nail manual focusing every single time. But let's face it, for travel filmmaking, you're gonna be using autofocus pretty much all the time, which is plenty good on this lens. Whether it be landscapes, eye tracking shots, or fast-paced transitions, this lens is flawless. I also want to touch on my camera focusing settings on my Sony A7S III. I set the transition speed to 6 and the subject shift sensitivity to 5, since it helps with transitions in camera and it is faster. The only time I dial the settings back is when I'm trying to get the smooth cinematic focus racking. Here, slower focusing will look better and feel more natural or cinematic. Looking at some photo samples, the Sigma 24-70 is razor sharp from corner to corner, producing rich, vivid colors and detailed images. Although sometimes I would notice it lacks some contrast, but that's just my taste. I like images with a lot of contrast. Being a Sigma art lens, even wide open at f2.8, the sharpness is insane, and stopping down to f5.6 or f8, while sharper, is not that much of a difference compared to f2.8, which is a big plus. And while it does not go down to f1.8 or f1.4 as say other primes, f2.8 is still plenty enough for low light photography or videography. So finally, who is this lens for? I've said that this is the only lens you need for travel filmmaking, since it combines 4 lenses into one. It saves you space, it saves you time, and you don't have to be swapping lenses all the time, and you don't have to carry 4 or 3 or 5 lenses with you in your bag. You just need one lens, one camera body, and you're good to go. If you're a travel filmmaker, a run and gun filmmaker, or just somebody that doesn't have the luxury of time or doesn't really want to waste his time swapping lenses, just needs one lens on the camera and you're good to go. This is the perfect, as a matter of fact, it's the only lens for you, unless you're willing to spend that much money on the Sony 24-70 GM2, but at just under $1,000, covering a lot of the focal range. Combine that with a constant f2.8 aperture, incredible sharpness, this lens is a steal. Imagine having 4 primes in your bag that you spent $5,000 on. Now take those 4 primes, throw them away, and get this lens instead. Just buy it. Affiliate links down in the description below. See you in the next video. Peace.